My name is Scott Bruckner. I'm the membership director for the North Coastal Art Gallery, also known as the Carlsbad Oceanside Art League. And I've been a member for over 10 years of that group. Pretty happy with what it's brought me as an artist. But today, we were just chatting about what would be a good thing to talk about in a group setting like this. And having been in art show after art show after art show and walked away and said, you know, why did that one win or whatever, I thought, what better subject than to have two judges actually talk about their judging process. And so that's what we're going to do today. I've been a sculptor for about 25 or so years. One of the pieces that's going to be talked about today is a piece of mine. This is not going to be a critique of these pieces. This is going to be a judging of the pieces. And there can be a difference from that. And if you want to ask what the difference is, that would be a good question to ask at the end. But today, we're going to get into it from a judging perspective. Let me introduce our first panelist, Kathy Carey, born in Washington, D.C., grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. She's a graduate of the Corcoran School of Art in Washington, D.C., and she has a BFA in painting and printmaking from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. She currently is the curator, I guess you'd call it, of the Front Porch Gallery.
And director.
And director. Her programs there, if you haven't been involved with them, are pretty incredible. Been a happy member of a couple of them, and she's doing some really terrific things there in the gallery. Helen Schaefer Garcia is a painter, mixed media, book arts, ceramist, artist, and award-winning illustrator. Her watercolor illustrations have been graced the cover brochures of garden articles and advertisements of numerous international resorts and magazines for more than 30 years. I'm not going to go further with the introductions at this point. I thought we'd just get right into it with the first question, which is, what form do you take in your judging process?
Start. Okay, so can everybody hear me? Hi, everybody. So what form do I take? So in looking at the pieces here, or looking at the pieces that are on offer, I determine what the show is about that these pieces are going to get into. And that's a big part of it. If the show is called the landscape show, then the best painting of a cup and saucer won't get in. So that's would be the first thing I think about. Then I start looking at composition, color, all the formal aspects, and is there something magical? I always look for something like that.
And for me, when I walk into the space where the show is running, so I walk into the space, whether it's a gallery, just an overview of how the works are shown in the space. And then I take a look and I walk around the entire area. I look at all of the works and I try to examine the size and the shape of each one. I also start thinking about the elements and principles of design as far as what is attracting me to one piece rather than another. But I take my time with this. I get a lot of steps in. And once I have that accomplished, then I go back and I start looking in even more detail at the particular pieces that are standing out to me. Okay?
The next question is one, do frames and matting impact your judging?
So that it does have some say in the jurying process, but it is not nearly as important for me as composition.
So for me, I don't always get to see the matting in the frame because a lot of the shows I'm judging have been digitally submitted. So when I'm hanging the show in the gallery after I've chosen the pieces, then that really matters. And I have definitely gone back to the artists and asked them to upgrade a framing, change a matting out if it's not doing the best that it can for the work, because the work was obviously good enough to get into the show. I don't want the frame to take away from it. If I'm judging a piece that has a frame and the frame is not good, I might go so far as to ask the artist if they could change it, if it's a really quality artwork that just needs a better frame.
You know, that brings up another question, which is when you have digital images that are submitted, love to hear what, as from a juror's standpoint, what can you have to say to us as artists as far as that digital image is concerned? Is there something that you see kind of over and over again saying, gee, if this image was better, I bet this would be a really good piece of work?
Definitely. What I can say is that learn how to take the best photograph you possibly can of your artwork, because the best artwork you ever do will be not a good artwork if you take a bad photograph of it. Have the lighting be good and even. There's a lot of good, Google it, there's a lot of good tutorials about it. Even lighting, outdoor lighting, if you're not gonna invest in a light setup, is really good. You need to have high DPI, like 300 DPI, so that if it's then going to be in a catalog, because you want to get that extra exposure. Sometimes I'll have people submit pieces and they haven't given me a large enough image to really see clearly, and then I can't reproduce it in a catalog either. So photographing your image is very important, the best it can possibly be.
And I haven't juried that many online shows, so as a participant, I find it somewhat difficult because I'm not that tech. And so it can be frustrating, but I try and ask friends and I gather the information and try not to stress out and submit it 2 hours before midnight, as some of us, not naming names, but and then you panic and then you just give up. But yeah, that criteria is always mentioned in the process to submit your work, and yes, it's critical that it shows. And the jurors in watercolor shows that I have submitted to, they're looking at 800 paintings. And so they're not gonna sit there and try to focus, or, they're just boom, 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 looking through these pieces. And that first instinct, that first blast is what is going to count.
So take the best image that you can possibly
Scott,
do.
I just have a quick question just regarding this. What size are you looking at when you're getting those in? In other words, what size? Are you looking at, 1 by 1 or 2 by 2?
Oh, well, it starts off as a thumbnail, and then I can click on it and have it be as large as my screen. So if you've got a really low resolution image, when it pulls up to be as big as my screen, because I've got a big screen, it will be breaking up and I can't really see it.
I was just curious to see.
Which brings up another thing. We have a little plug here for our 72nd annual Fine Arts Open Show. And if you want to enter that, you have until July 17th. And that's done on the online juried show platform. So if you haven't done that before, you need help with it, you can certainly contact me. Moving on to the next question, which is, I don't know, if you identify an artist you're familiar with, how does it affect your judging?
That is a tough question. I mean, that is sometimes tough for us because we've been around. And so I have caught myself looking at the signature, but I really have to stay away from any recognizable part of that and push myself towards just looking at the painting, the quality of the painting. So, yeah, I do not take that into consideration at all.
Totally agree with that. I don't take it into consideration who did it, I take it into consideration how they did it. So if anything, if I know that artist A has submitted this piece of work, I'm like, oh, I recognize that, that's artist A. And I think, oh, for Artist Day paintings though, that's not as good as I've seen that they can do. That might affect it. But I don't ever say, oh, I know this is this person and they're really good. And I don't know that person, so I don't ever do that. And I think that's just part of the integrity of judging something, is that you're looking at it in terms of how good it is as an image of artwork and how it's gonna fit into the show, because like I said, I am often putting things into a themed show. How's it gonna fit in that show with the other pieces? Do I already have another piece that looks like that? Sometimes that might affect it. I have 3 river scenes. I may have to take one out, so those are the kinds of ways I look at it.
Thank you. When you're looking at work, whether it be online on a juried show that way or in person, do you ever rule out a piece of work because of an issue you see in the work? And what would those issues be like? That's kind of taking a negative approach to looking at work. Sorry.
Okay, you want me to start on that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my big thing is color. So if somebody uses color well, even if it's, however they're doing it, that's always a plus for me. But if I see if somebody hasn't really handled the color well, that's a really big red flag to me. There's a color word. So I notice that. If the composition feels awkward, I notice that. If, the image is wanting to be realistic, in other words, it's not trying to be impressionist, expressionist, abstract, or, something else like that, comic art. And it doesn't quite make it all the way to looking realistic, comfortably realistic. That's a big drawback.
Yeah, I agree with all those points, and what I'm looking for, again, is first the composition. What draws me to that piece? What makes me stay within that piece when I'm viewing it? Do I want to look out to the edge? Do I want to leave and move on to the next piece? That is absolutely the criteria that I look for. Also, like you mentioned about technique, if it's going to be realistic, it needs to have the techniques down. The painting has to show that particular guideline. But also, I view the pieces for creativity and getting outside the box, so to speak. And sometimes the technique or the so-called talent is not as important to me as the approach. What is this piece trying to tell me? What is it saying? And it's all objective. Some pieces you've seen in a museum, you go, what the heck? Why is that even in there? But again, it's a communication between you and the artwork. What is it trying to tell you, and what do you see? What kind of emotion do you see when you look at that piece? Do you try to look around it, if it's a sculpture, of course? Or do you get in trouble when you get too close to the piece? In a museum, the beep goes off, the guard comes over. But that's telling you there's something about this that's drawing me in, and that's really important.
Thank you. For kind of the flip side of that is, if there was one thing that might set a piece up for a ribbon right off the bat, what would that one thing be?
I'll start with that one. So again, digital shows, this always happens. In-person shows, I'm not sure if it happens as much, but if there's an artist statement that has been asked for, and somebody supplies it, and it's very thoughtful, well-written, and it actually applies to the artwork, like this is really what this person is doing, and you can feel it, and it fits the theme of the show, boy, that's just a lock. That's a really important thing. So in addition to really taking great photographs, really think about what your piece is about and what you can say about it, because when I know your intention, and I can see you accomplished it, that means a lot. If I'm still trying to guess what your intention is, maybe you really achieved it, but I just can't tell it maybe. So the artist statement's a big deal.
And again, that's communication between the two parties, the artist and the person viewing it. And yes, that's what, again, what I mentioned before, which speaks to me, what holds my attention, how do I view that? And yeah, there's things that pull me away from during a piece, in which could be the technique, it could be, but mainly the composition. And lastly, what is the artist trying to say? Like you said, sometimes you cannot figure out the criteria or the message.
I'm making some notes.
Can I say one more thing about it?
You bet.
So when you look at different art styles and when art styles change, it's because somebody didn't do the style before that well. They wouldn't have been juried into that style before its show. You know, so the Impressionists didn't get juried into the style before them. So sometimes when something's trying to change like that, you might not understand it and you might not like it. But if you can tell the person is doing it with integrity, then that means a lot. And it's kind of like, oh, this is trying to break out of the box, kind of like what you were saying. And that can be a really important thing. So if you're going to do something different, really commit to doing it, because I think that shows. If something's kind of not completely done, it doesn't look like it has that commitment to it.
Can I add
Yeah,
one more?
absolutely, go ahead. Yeah, we have plenty of time.
And also, what I see in a lot of shows is an artist emulating another artist's style. I see that quite often in jurying. And yes, that's the way to learn. That's the way to become better at that particular style. But move away and approach it in a new light. Take 10 more workshops from different artists in the same medium or what have you, or even in another medium. You know, you're always learning as artists, always. We don't retire. We die, but we don't retire. And so it's critical. You always need to find a new approach and experiment. Don't stay in the same glitch of doing the same kind of painting. I've seen that a lot in Santa Fe, Charles, where both of us have shown our pieces. There are artists there's one particular artist who has painted girls with horses or with cows or with sheep, but for 35 years it's the same exact type. But it sells, you see. So that to me, I never want to get into that rut. And I encourage you to just keep exploring and finding your own particular style, but still have that stretch within it.
Thank you. Have you ever had an artist ask you about your judging of their piece of theirs? And do you like to share your opinion with the artist directly? And would you encourage other artists
Depends on
to
the
seek
person.
feedback after being judged?
Okay, yes, yes, I have had that happen. And if somebody is politely and sincerely asking me, okay, I would like to learn, and not questioning my ability, like, why didn't you let me in? Or more angrily sometimes. You know, I'm happy to share it, because sometimes what it is like, the piece was lovely, it's fantastic, it will probably get into the next show. But maybe it was a river scene, and I have 3 river scenes, and this show is really about trees, you know, so it just kind of didn't fit somehow. That can be a real problem, and people, I can understand, they think, this is a beautiful painting, what was wrong with it? And maybe it's just that it didn't fit the show. So yeah, you can ask me, that's fine. Also, if somebody asks me from a learning experience, I'm just, I'm trying to figure this out, I just changed my style, I just started. What was it that, maybe I could do differently or better? I am very happy to interact with somebody to say that.
Likewise, I haven't had too many people come up, because I always leave, no. But, yeah, in some shows, I've had a couple people ask, and Or when I tell them that this is going to be Bess's show and they give me this look. You know, that clearly they want to know, but it's not the right opportunity to talk about it. But yes, it's all about your approach to the juror in a positive, learning way, that you want to find out some of the criteria that we are looking at. And yeah, if it gets angry, walk away.
Thank you for that. One of the things is, I'm going to change a mic here in a second. I handed out to everybody the suggested judging criteria, and there's 5 items that are on it. And maybe you could address which one of those you feel is most important. Are they all important? I presume you take all of that into consideration when you're looking at a piece.
It's right here. the
Yeah.
first- Okay.
Let me just do this. There you go.
Do you want me to start off on this one, or should we bounce back and forth, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I say all of these are important. There's no one thing that jumps up before something else. If 4 of those are excellent and 1 of them is horrible, that's not good. We've talked a lot about composition being important and craftsmanship being important, so maybe what I'll focus on this one is originality and creativity. So this is very important because artwork is from an individual person and it's saying something about them, what's important to them, what they're trying to express to me, how they're trying to make me feel, how they feel. And I find if somebody can do that successfully, that it's a successful painting. And in terms of that, all of these other things apply. So let's say that it's a happy painting, and it's a happy painting about a cat, okay? If the cat is in the upper part of the composition, things in the upper part of a composition are very optimistic, they're filled with spirit, you're looking up to them, that's a good placement for something that's happy. If the cat is in the lower part of the composition and it's in shadows and the whole thing has been painted with muted colors, but the name of the painting is The Happy Cat, it's not saying, you're not checking off all the boxes. You want the happy cat to be in the upper composition, warm colors, vivid colors, you get my meaning? So that's why all these different pieces are important. As long as they're all saying the same thing, you're making a successful piece. And when you're doing it with originality and creativity, to me, that means you've figured out how you are analyzing and abstracting the world and sharing that with other people. So if you're doing somebody else's style, like Helen said, it's a good way to learn, but that should somehow be able to translate through you. How does that change coming through you? It should look different somehow. So those are my judging groups.
Yes, and yes, so as far as any one of these standing out, no, I agree that all of them are equally as important. However, I talked earlier about presentation as not being quite on the same level. My first criteria is the composition. How do you as the viewer look at this piece and want to stay and embrace it or discuss it with somebody? As far as craftsmanship, that's could be equally as important, but again, sometimes creativity takes over the craftsmanship for me, and the artist may have not executed one particular part technically correct, but was he or she trying to make a statement with that? If there's a scratch through the painting, is that part of the message? I have to look at these aspects as well as, is it technically perfect and is the presentation perfect? I always try to look at the way I interact with the piece.
We have another question, and then we're going to get into the judging. And this is going to actually address what we're about to do, which is, have you been on a panel with more than one judge, and how does that affect the judging process?
No, if I have. I can't say that I have been on a jury panel. Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So with Serving Madonna Oceans Project, we always had 3 judges.
Oh,
And there was me, and there was the president of Serving Madonna at the time, who wasn't an artist, but knew what he liked, and he liked a really different style of art than I did. And then there was always a third person who hopefully also liked something different. Maybe it was a sculpture person or whatever. And so we would go through and we would choose all of our top 10, you know. And then we'd compare, and the ones that, you know, connected, it's like, oh, okay, those are in. Then we would kind of discuss and try and convince each other as to why. And sometimes one or the other of them would have a very compelling reason, and I would change my mind. Or they, you know, or I could change their mind. So it's you're negotiating, you're discussing. They will have a different point of view than I do. Mike, the president, he always really liked happy paintings that to me looked a little bit not so serious, you know, but then I thought, yeah, that's a style, you know, and so we always would try and honor that. So, yeah, it's give and take.
Okay, sounds good. Now we're going to enter into the next part of our presentation, which is to your left. You'll see an oil painting, watercolor, and a sculpture. And we're not critiquing these pieces of work today. You're actually giving us your insight into your judging process and how you would judge each one of them. So, take it away.
Okay, want me to start
Are we
pushing
doing-
through all 3, or?
yeah.
What I would suggest that maybe we start with maybe the oil.
Okay.
Okay.
And you give us the benefit of how, as a judge, you would view an oil painting in
Okay.
the contest, and what would go into your judging of this specific painting. We're
Okay.
not looking for you to judge the number 1, 2nd, and 3rd of these 3, just,
Okay.
you know.
Got it. So, let me start?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm an oil painter, so that makes it kind of easy for me. I know what you can do with oil. I know when somebody's doing something interesting and unusual. So and I also love color. So when I look at this picture, I like the way that the light is being creating a focal point. I like the way the boat's in the focal point. I like the way it's got a canyon composition. I like the way the mist is in contrast to some of the really sharp, strong features. So there's a lot of very nicely done, unusual things about this piece that makes me notice it. I like the way it's framed. I like the way the frame has blue in it, and the blue in the painting, they speak to each other, and it seems that's very nicely done. Somebody took care to choose that particular frame. They didn't just go over to a drugstore and get a diploma frame. Sometimes I even look at the way somebody does their signature and where they do it, and I like the way the signature in this, the color that they used for that. It's not overpowering, but you see it, and it's also in a nice balance to the rest of the picture. If they had put that signature over in the dark edge in the right side, in that color, it would have created an accidental focal point. So I'm hoping that that person realized that. And so again, that's a sensitive position. So I would look at this very favorably.
And my world has been mainly watercolor. So looking at oils is obviously a different approach. I admire oil painting so much, and the pigment richness of oil painting. For this particular piece, I think that the waterway coming through is very attractive. Your eye moves through the piece where that bright white is, and again, that focal point of the small boat in the work. The mountains surrounding this travel way are interesting, but not as interesting. The whole piece reads cool to me. And with the bits of little orange and yellow in the waterway, that's quite interesting. And it breaks up all the coolness in the work. The lower right-hand side forms a little bit of a triangle cut off that dark that's down there, whether it's a rock, what have you. That's a little worrisome. However, your eye doesn't necessarily go down there because some of the other values are close to it. My eye goes upward to the sky area and again moves back through to the brightness of that water. So.
That's great. Kathy, since you're all painter, what detracts or what negatives do you find in the painting?
Well, in the foreground, can you hear me if I'm not speaking directly into it? In the foreground, the only piece that I would have liked to have seen the way the light merges into the water in the foreground, that could have been blended more creamy, more smooth. It's got some hard edges there, and oil painting is such that you could easily blend that. And I don't see why that would be like that. I don't see why that would have been a purposeful, oh no, that's what it looked like. So that could have been a little better.
There is one area for me at the reflection on the right side appears to be very flat and not as translucent as it should be. Reflections can be extremely difficult to pull off, and the hard edge along that reflection in the water is, to me, a little too defined.
Super, great. Why don't we move on to the next one, which is, I believe that's a watercolor.
Yep, since that's your arena, you want to
Okay. So this particular piece to me, I'm not sure that I would call it a full composition due to the fact that it's a vignette, meaning that the painting edges some of the edges don't go to the edge of the format. So that's an entirely different ballgame as far as a work of art. It's a bit narrative, which means, of course, telling a story. I really enjoy the color harmony in this piece, the subtleness of the warms that range from the browns and even into some purples into the shadow areas. I think the architecture painting is really well done. I like the coolness that are in the shadows of that concrete. And the focal point could be a little stronger. The yellow flowers are there, but it's not that boom, that pull to look at that first. I think I look at the arch first instead of the flower pot. But overall, as far as a full-blown composition, that's a bit tricky on that because it's a vignette.
Okay, well, I've painted a lot in watercolor, so not as much as Helen. But I would say that I think the technique that's used is nicely done. The vignette, so here's what I would think about a vignette like that. So that doesn't necessarily completely detract. I think the painter's name was Gilbert Stuart, and he did a painting of Washington that's very famous. And it's not finished. The bottom of the painting isn't finished, and you've probably all seen this painting of George Washington. It's probably the most famous painting of George Washington. But it isn't finished, and that it's not finished brings even more meaning to this painting of George Washington, who had just founded this new country, this new idea that wasn't finished. And so somehow those two ideas came together and they created a third, even more powerful idea. So in thinking about it in terms of that, does it being a vignette help what it is? And I don't think it does, so that's not as good. I think the sensitivity of the neutral colors is beautiful. I love the kind of Payne's gray color down in there that gives it some blue against the browns. But what I would say is not strong enough is the value structure. So if you've got that much light, you really need to have a powerful shot of dark. And so what Helen was saying about the yellow flowers, that area in reality and in the need of what the painting is asking to have, could be darker there. And in being darker there, you could go with the complement, and have a purpley blue deep shadow, which would really pop those flowers out some more. I know it's not a critique, but as I'm looking at it, I would feel the picture overall feels too soft, and just a little bit of pops like that would really, could make it really excellent. It's not quite, yeah.
We're gonna have a time at the end for you to ask questions too, if you got some more questions for them. Why don't we move on to the sculpture?
All right, so, with this piece, it's about movement and flow. And I'm encouraged to look at the negative space, which is really incredibly important for a sculpture, a three-dimensional piece. It does have, to me, a front and a back. We haven't really viewed it from the side, but I'm encouraged to walk around it because of the space. Especially the closed space where the ball sits in that little groove towards the top, the larger ball. I think that's really an interesting part of this. And again, as far as movement, I'm looking at how the flow moves out from the center wood part, the blue pieces, but I'm not moving away. I'm rotating back into looking at the piece. So it's a circle. There's lots of circle shapes, there's half circles, and I really enjoy the flow of being able to move back in.
Beautiful, yeah, so when I look at this piece, my first feeling is it's sensual, it's playful, it's beautifully crafted, it's been well made and created. The composition's really fantastic, so I gotta talk about that. So the way the pieces are all fitted together, they all seem exactly right. It's like if one of those balls were to be taken away, there would be something missing. If one of the balls was in a different location on those arcs than where they are right now, it would be awkward feeling. The bigger picture on this one, when I look at it and I think about the sensuality of the shape, meaning just the curving line, I can feel that movement in space, and the way it complements those shiny, hard pieces that are so round. They're beautiful together. The color blue, that cobalt blue, with the warm, neutral wood color, it is gorgeous complements together. They really hold each other in place. It's very strong like that. But the other thing I see about it, which is probably the most important thing when you're talking about the magic or the creativity or the uniqueness of a piece, is the meaning that just looking at it that I derive. I have no idea if the artist thought this. But I see the two shapes as being like a male and a female, or two partners, something like that. And that they each have an equal piece that they hold. And the third piece between them is that there's this bigger thing that comes from their connection, which there's this bigger piece by them being like kind of back to back like that, supporting each other's back. I see it as just being this wonderfully playful, very strong, interesting to look at piece. So.
Thank you for that. Let's talk about ribbons for a second. Just looking at these three pieces, do you think they have a quality to be a ribbon? Or if not, what would draw it back from being one of the contenders for a ribbon? I know that's pretty tough since you got nothing else to judge it by.
Yeah, I don't know how to approach that.
Are they in a show together?
This is the show. No.
Okay, well, that does change it.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I just wondered if there was something that you feel about any of these pieces that, as a juror, you would say, wow, I would really consider this for a ribbon.
stands on this.
Okay.
On its
well,
own,
that's-
on its own merit.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, yeah, I think I can address that. Let me know. Yeah. So I feel like the sculpture is very unique. I have seen things like the watercolor many times, that a pot and a ledge in someplace in Italy maybe. And I've seen pieces like this one's a little bit more unusual, but still I have seen things like that. While it's very lovely, that one feels very unique to me, you know, and so I like that. I always like unique things. And if they've been well done and the everything fits together so nicely like that, that's really a big extra points for me. So that would be, if it was amongst these three, that one is definitely the standout. But even with other sculpture, like if I can imagine and think in my mind, oh, imagine really great sculptures, would that stand out? I do believe that would still stand out.
So, yeah, as far as the two paintings, we have seen many, many paintings like them. The watercolor wouldn't speak to me as an award winner. Due to the criteria we talked about. The oil painting is also, this is tough because we don't have anything else to go by, but it is a strong piece. It has a strong composition, but there's some technical aspects of it that kind of hold me back. It wouldn't be best to show, it might be third, it just all depends on what else is being critiqued and juried in the show. And the sculpture is very, very strong to me. I think that it would definitely hold as an award winner. And like we said, it's the movement and the strokes and the rhythm in the piece that's really interesting. So.
One of the things, and I don't know, I'm just coming from where I'm coming from, but, and I don't even know if you could comment on this, but, a lot of us enter show after show after show and come away sometimes with no ribbons or no awards, and we kind of wonder, gee, is my work really worthwhile? Can you address that? I noticed you talked about uniqueness, and it seems to me that looking at shows, it seems like the judges are looking for more unique rather than a really quality work. If you had a quality landscape or seascape or something like that, is it kind of going to be overlooked because you've got something over here that is totally different or unique?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And that's tough. That actually is kind of tricky. So if there's an oil painting that's beautifully done of an ocean scene that you've seen many, many, many times, there's got to be something in it that makes it feel fresh. So that's the problem of painting something that's been done many, many times. It's not like, oh, there's nothing new to paint. Well, you're new, so everything you paint supposedly is new, but you may need to see it in a new way in order to paint it in a new way. You might be seeing it in the same way you've always seen it. And I think it shows when people try and push out of that. But I like quality artwork that's been, I can tell the artist knows what they're doing and they're doing it on purpose. Mm-hmm. Even if it's, if it's an impressionist painting, it stands up against good impressionist paintings. If it's a loose expressive painting, it holds up against loose expressive paintings. So they don't have to be in competition with each other. They're in competition with that style.
Believe me, my works have been rejected over and over. All through the years, it doesn't get any better as far as rejections or getting accepted. It just depends on the venue, the type of work that's being accepted. Particularly in the watercolor world, there seems to be flows of acceptance with particular styles. I've noticed that. And that's not my forte, it's not my style, but I still enter and get rejected. But I see that happen in the larger watercolor competitions. It's subjective, of course. It's not fair, and every time I get rejected, I'm just so depressed. But I think it's important for us to take that rejection and become stronger with our will to create and move past what you think a juror would like. Don't go into a show and look up the juror's work and say, okay, I'm gonna paint just like that painter, and I'm gonna do a barn and a yellow field because she did it. I hear that quite often. Keep going in your own style, and if it doesn't work, try a different show. If it doesn't work in that, have your own show. You know? Don't give up on your vision and your direction.
Excellent, yeah, you made me think of something else I wanted to add if I can. And that is, styles change all the time about what's good. Like, well, is this a good piece of artwork? I don't know, ask an art historian, because it's gonna change, In today's world, we're looking at it with our eyes today. 100 years from now, it could be, the hottest thing going, and we don't ever really know that. So I just like to pretend, well, whatever I'm doing 100 years from after I'm dead is gonna be great. So, I don't have to worry about it, And I don't really care if other people like it or not. Of course, I hope they do, but it's not like I'm gonna stop doing it if they don't. So you wanna be strong about what you're doing because you're doing it because you like it. And I think that shows in your work. And I know the conundrum about entering shows. And I remember I used to think, if I enter this show and I get in and it's only yeah, okay, that's great. But if I don't get in, it's gonna ruin my world. Then that might not be a show I should, you know what I mean? So, challenge yourself, but don't let it affect your drive and your respecting your work and, your integrity about it.
Yeah, keep learning from it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We're to the question and answer portion of the program. But first, I'd like to thank the City of Carlsbad for backing us to do these programs here in this facility. So, what questions do we have?
I have two short questions. One is, has to do with signature. Many times when I paint an abstract, I won't sign it in the front because I want the person that's viewing the painting can rotate to his choice, triangular, square, whatever. And if I direct the precision of the painting, I'm forcing him to look at it the way I look at it, and not the way he may want to see it. So sometimes I'll just sign the back. Does that affect judging?
So the question, I'm going to kind of repeat your questions just because we're on camera here. The question is, does the signature affect your judging process? And I think you kind of addressed that with the oil painting. But
Right. As far, you're talking about after you complete the painting, you might want to rotate it in a different direction.
Right.
According to
My taste.
your taste, okay. And that's perfectly fine. However, when you enter into a competition, yes, we are gonna see that signature usually at the lower right or left-hand side. But, when we're looking at these pieces, and I addressed that earlier, we don't want to really know who it is. The only thing that I object to is an artist who okay, let's say it's the landscape back here, and the artist has a bright red giant signature. So it's all about me, but not the painting. I object to that. But you can put the signature wherever you'd like it. As far as the placement, if you are thinking about selling the piece, I would encourage you to have it on the front. maybe you could put it on all four corners.
The other question I have is, when you paint a tight painting, and you're focused on points of vanishing points, you know, and many paint just one point vanishing point, but if you're painting with multiple vanishing points within the painting itself, is it advisable to have at least one focal point and the rest can maybe skew a little bit so that it forces you to see the initial vanishing point that you want to look at, rather than, you know, because there's a science to vocal, you know, to focal points and how far you're going to be from the painting, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
So that's a difficult question to analyze. Are you saying, is it good to have multiple focal points?
No,
or
it's
is it
fine.
good?
I'm just saying that when you do that intentionally, should you, you know, the main focal point would be the one that's maybe, you know, the one that you want people to look at, but at the same time, the other focal points, you know, that are skewed, you make them skewed so that it don't have as much importance as the one that you want to convey.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I jump
Go
in?
ahead.
So, I think you're talking about in an abstract or a realistic, in a tight painting?
Realistic.
Realistic, okay. So one of the things that Monet changed about composition in modern painting, like modern painting kind of started with Monet, because it used to be that the focal point was the eyes or the hands of the Pope, the bishop, the rich guy that commissioned you to do this painting, or the dogs or horses or whatever it was going to be, you know, or, you know, the house. But when Monet started painting, his idea was to have multiple, you know, to energize the entire composition and to keep the blue in the sky should like circulate throughout the painting for good circulation. And that he had multiple focal points kind of because of that. Warms were next to cools, vivids were next to neutrals, lights next to darks. But when you create your main focal point, so like the happy cat, you know, it's like you don't want to be noticing the spot on the floor, because that's not the name of the painting. That's where you want to have all of your focal point things, your weapons are hitting that spot, you know, it's light as light, dark as dark, angles are all going that way. So in terms of perspective, yes, you want to be able to see that that's clearly where we're supposed to be looking. You can have multiple other places that aren't as energized to the same extent as your main focal point. Is that what you're asking? Okay.
As far as multiple points, yes, as far as the main focal point that you're talking about, is it on?
It just went on.
It did?
Yeah, we lost sound.
No problem. You got brothers.
I seem to be wrong.
I have a problem.
You might have an electricity field.
As far as the main focal point that you intended, for me, it's seconds. When I look at it, what do I look at first? Seconds. And then those supporting other features. That's the journey from that second viewing. And I can bounce around, and will I return to that main focus? That's how it works.
I have two questions. The first is, you're talking about the artist's statement. A lot of times you don't get a chance to make a statement, or you're not asked to make one. Let me ask about online juried shows. When you're asked for a description, was that supposed to be a statement, or just kind of like make sure you got the right picture with the with the thing? What do you think?
Yeah.
It gives you, every time that they ask for something like that, it's giving you an opportunity to ingratiate yourself with the judge, you know? So if you can take full advantage of that, you should. So when you're describing your picture, instead of saying, a cat sleeps in the sun against a dark background, you should make somebody feel it, you know, so that when they look at it, they're there with you.
Yeah, I just made that mistake in a show that I was in, and I addressed it, you know, it was a book arts exhibition, and I listed everything: linen thread, Canson edition paper, You know, I just listed everything, cause I didn't quite, I mean, to me, that's a description of using book arts. But I looked at the other descriptions that they copied and used next to the works, yeah. It was more descriptive, it was a storytelling, it was why I did this, and so.
Yeah, just one extra thing. Imagine it's the label on the wall next to your piece. You know, so that this is what this
Even
painting.
though it's not going to be.
It might be.
No, it's not.
It might
Well, we
be.
don't.
But I'm just saying, it
calls
could be.
show.
So
Yeah,
think
okay,
about it
okay.
as being that would be helpful.
In that same vein, do you find the title of the piece helps at all to understand it, or?
Sometimes it does, but I shy away from looking at that title.
Oh,
Again, I wanna look at the work of art first, but if it makes me laugh, that's always cool, but no, and sometimes it gives us a description of the particular message or story that the artist is trying to give us. And if it's telling us too much of a story in that title, then I look back at the painting and it's not, that's a problem.
Yeah, for me, I think it just lets me know what room am I supposed to be in as I judge this. You know, is it abstract number 12 or is it, you know, how I lost my soul? You know, it's like.
Both.
So if you're applying to a show and you're applying like 3 pieces in a show that has multiple categories, and you do multiple categories, does that discourage the judging because you're not showing the continuity?
I don't think it's an issue. I'm across the board as far as what I work with, as far as mediums.
So you could do one of your watercolors with one of your clay people, one of your
Right,
book
right.
arts.
In the
And they
same,
wouldn't say, wait a minute, there's not a continuity of the artist is supposed to be.
no, I'm one of those artists who, I wanna do it all.
Yeah, do you feel the same way?
I do in terms of a show, but if you're approaching a gallery, think of yourself as a product.
That's
You're a
different.
brand.
You're a
And
brand.
You're butter and you're unsalted. You know, I mean, you're very specific, you know. So you don't want to show a portfolio to a gallery with 5 different styles.
Yeah.
But in a show like the San Diego County Fair or something, yeah, enter as many different ones as you can. You know, I think that we all wish we could do a little bit of everything, you know.
Lori? You go.
Okay. So kind of dovetailing with what you just talked about, I did a show recently where the juror was talking about, and he was like, okay, there's 15 seascapes, I need to decide which 5 are gonna be in the show or whatever, and they might all be great, but I've gotta pick 5. There's a difference between that jurying, judging, and then the commercial. Like you take the San Diego County Fair, they're only gonna pick so many seascapes, but maybe all the seascapes are what's gonna sell. So can you talk a little bit about that difference between the artistic merit and the commercial merit?
good question.
For me personally, and that's happened, I look for things that are different. So like one is like a totally straight, perfectly impressionistic, California Impressionism, beautiful, clean, lovely. Next, I might want something that's a little rougher. Somebody used thicker paint, they used a palette knife. Basically, it might be the same scene. And then another one, I may want to see somebody that's added reds and oranges to the blues as a point of bounce or friction or complement. So I would look for different ways to say the same thing if I'm just going to show 5 different seascapes.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. A variety pack of technique or styles is really important because you need to know your audience and that everyone is not going to want the same traditional painting. And you know, something's gonna pop over here for one viewer and over here they're gonna be drawn to that particular style. So that's really important to have across the board interest for everyone.
Great. Well, we're kind of pushing up to the hour, so I thought I would give each one of you, you know, a moment to reflect on today and what you feel as artists need to know from a juror, that we need better or more or whatever.
We're always striving to be better, but I think it's more important to look again at your journey and what touches you, what interests you as far as continuing on with a particular style or a particular medium, and go from there. The thing that, and I discussed this earlier, don't get into a rut. Don't get into, I'm gonna make 10,000 paintings of the Oceanside Harbor. Don't get into a particular theme that you know is very popular. Just get out there and paint an outhouse or you know, something so unusual. Look at it in a different way. To me, that's the most important way you can do this.
So, okay, I have two wrap-ups here. One is, I think it's important to figure out who you are in terms of your artwork. You might really admire elegant, perfectly realistic paintings, but you might be very sloppy and, you know, you may struggle horribly to try and keep it like that. I would suggest you go in the direction that you are. Become the very best at that, because you won't even be in the running with a style that you're not comfortable doing. So that's one thing. About framing, one of my things is like when people do paintings on canvas and they have the staples on the sides, that should always be framed. If you want to put a canvas in a show and not have it be framed, that's fine, but it should be on the thicker canvas. Even that on a thin canvas, even if the gallery wrap is going around it, if it's thin, it looks insubstantial. It really doesn't look completed. And imagine somebody coming in, loving your painting, and taking it back to the Rancho Santa Fe house. Are they gonna put that on the wall? You need to give it that look, like this is done. This is an excellent product that I have completed. It's tidy, it's done. You can have the gallery wrap and it can have sloppy paint all over the sides of it as long as it matches the style of the painting. But don't have a super realistic front and sloppy sides.
Okay, well, I think that's a wrap for today. I want to thank Helen and Kathy for your time today, and if you have other questions, you can certainly come on up and ask them. Thank you very much.